This week's podcast is a listener question on how to create a journaling habit and what to do about writer's block. Here's the email. Journaling is mentioned a lot in both Sarah's micro episodes and Kyle's macro episodes. I see the value in this, but I struggle with trying to implement it into my routine. I would love to get some suggestions from one or both of you that could provide some help with how to make this easier to deploy. Is there a good place for prompts, like a website or book you can recommend that inspire this creative spark? A lot of prompts I found are too vague and put me in my head when I try to write what comes up. Any ideas about how to break writer's block when journaling? Related to the comment about prompts, I find that I have trouble actually writing anything when I try to do this exercise. I spend all my time trying to think about what to write, but I never actually write anything. Hi, this is Sarah Russell. I'm your microdosed host here with your weekly mood boost and tools for transformation. And in today's episode, I'll be telling you how to start a journaling habit and give you some tips for how to stick with it. Okay, so let's assume that journaling is a new habit for you. And we know change takes energy. It takes awareness, it takes motivation, it takes practice, and it takes time. Luckily for us, we have James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, who has found a way to make change a little less onerous. And he's got some laws that he follows, and those are make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. So if we're talking about making it obvious, this is about the cue. The cue is that you get to see that journal or that laptop or whatever it is that you're going to be using to write. It's really, really obvious. And so the way I had to make this obvious for myself, some of you may have heard this story, I was noticing that because I, like so many other people, use my phone to wake up as an alarm in the morning, it means I'm reaching for my phone very first thing. Like as soon as I wake up, I'm reaching and touching my phone before I do anything else. And it is all too easy to then start checking text messages or emails or Instagram. And so I realized that the best time of day for me to write is first thing in the morning. That's what works for me. I'm not saying that's what's going to work for you, but I knew I wanted to have a morning journal ritual specifically. So what did I do? I put my journal on top of my phone so my knuckles would literally hit the hardback cover of my journal every time my alarm was going off so that I would remember to journal. So that's how I made it obvious. Other ways that you might make it obvious are having a place set up in your house by your favorite window, at your cute little breakfast nook. The journal's already out. The pen's already set. You're making it so the environment is already primed to start journaling. So you're not having to shuffle through a drawer trying to find some beat up journal. The pen is out of ink. By the way, you forgot that you even wanted to start a morning journal because you already have your morning routine set. So make it as easy for yourself as possible. The second law is make it attractive, and this is about anticipating pleasure, and I have to tell you, my brother is a master at this as far as journaling is concerned, because he has all of his German and Japanese companies who produce these very high-end notebooks with this very smooth paper that doesn't bleed through, so like when you're using your nice pens, you can write on both sides, and like the texture of the pen on the paper is just, it's like butter. It's like, oh, so smooth. And then the pens that he uses, they're beautiful colors and materials. It's filled with his favorite kinds of ink. It's very attractive and very satisfying. And again, those of you who have listened to my other podcasts know that we have a strong neurodivergent line in our family, which does include OCPD. So yes, these kinds of things are deeply satisfying to the members of my family. Find out what makes it satisfying for you. What makes it actually attractive to you? What makes you get drawn towards that? For us, it's definitely the stuff. It's definitely the tools. Then you want to make it easy. And one of the things I talked about is like having it all set up already, right? So the book is out, the pen's on top of it, you have your prompt ready to go. And don't worry, yes, I am going to give you some tips for how to find a prompt. That's going to come later. Another way that you can make it easy is set a timer. So when I was first starting my journaling practice, I did a 3-minute morning journal. 3 minutes. And this wasn't about like, oh, I was going to write my novel by writing for 3 minutes every day. No, it was just to get that muscle memory, to start doing my reps, to get it habituated in my body that this is what we do in the morning. And then after like 3 minutes becomes easy, bump it to 5, and then you can bump it to 15, and then who knows, sky's the limit. But the point is to start with something that's easy, because if you start with something that's easy, your body's not going to hate it every single time you sit down to do the task, right? If you go, oh, I'm going to journal for half an hour every day, then your body is grinding through that. You're experiencing stress, you're getting bored, you're shaming on yourself because you don't know what to write about or what you wrote wasn't very good. And then the next time you sit down to journal, your body goes, screw that. That sucked. I never want to do that again. And what you want to do is you want to give your body the experience of, that was so easy. I could totally do that again. So, James Clear talks about this, like when you're trying to build a reading habit, like start with reading one page. Like this isn't about finishing the book. This is about building the habit initially. So go easy on yourselves. You have permission. And then the next one is to make it satisfying. And so this is the fourth law. And this is about rewards, right? So the reward for me, I couldn't look at Instagram until I had done my 3-minute morning journal. And then I got to scroll and I got to look at all my astrology memes and like whatever else it is that I follow. To be honest, it's mostly like all of the people that I'm going to list in this, James Clear and like a psychologist later on, like basically it's their accounts that I'm scrolling through. That's my pleasure, like seeing what they have to say. So like, what's your reward? Like, what are you going to do for yourself? Are you going to make your favorite cup of whatever it is that you like to drink? Like, are you going to do like me and you're going to hop onto social media in some way, but reward yourself. You did something new. Doing new things is hard. Good job. Pat yourself on the back. Do it. Figure out what that is for you. So things you can think about in order to establish this habit are, where do you want to do it? So I was just talking to a client recently where she was talking about where she was going to journal was in a space that was quite cluttered and distasteful to her. So she realized she was going to have to change the space, or she could have done it somewhere else, right? So figure out some place that you like to sit down. So this little nook that I'm in right now, I've got this big old crystal that my mom gave me, the lights pouring in for me, the turkeys wander by outside. I can hear them gobbling, bunnies hop across. I leave my front door open, and I don't know if I've told you this before, but I share my morning pancakes with the little brown birds around here. So birds will fly in and chirp at me when they know that they need more pancakes. So like I'm doing, it's very Snow White in here when I'm journaling in the morning. That gives me a lot of pleasure. It makes me want to sit down and do it because all of those things are in place. Think about when you want to do it. So you're like, yeah, first thing in the morning, like that's when I want to do it. But you're not a morning person and you're super groggy and you're barely like making toast before you're running out the door to get to work. Like, you don't have to do a morning journal. It doesn't have to be first thing in the morning. Are you a night owl? Maybe you do it right before you go to bed at night. Maybe you do it on your lunch break. Like, when is it actually going to be functional? When are you actually going to want to sit down and write? The other thing is you can think about how long. So for instance, for me, I was saying 3 minutes was what I had. You might need to write one line. You might need to sit down for longer than that, but you're really going to be checking in with the felt sense in your body around what works for you, because we're looking for ease, because with that ease, we're going to want to repeat it. And with that repetition, it becomes a habit. And then there's some ease around it. And now we're journaling as a habit. And then think about what obstacles are in your environment that you need to remove. So what's distracting you from actually doing that journaling habit? So for instance, for me, it was my phone, which meant I actually had to block my phone. All right, now let's get to this question about, is there a good place for prompts? And I have to tell you, one of my favorite writing exercises came from my high school writing teacher, where in this writing class, he would bring in things to inspire us for creative writing. This was for creative writing, like, fiction. And one of the times he brought in a painting, and our writing assignment was to tell a story about that painting. Sometimes he would bring in music. One time he brought in a plant. Like, he would just bring in things, and then we'd have to write about whatever it was in front of us. Inspiration can come from a variety of places. In other words, it can come from the books you're reading, the podcast you're listening to, your favorite playlist, or a conversation with your friends. The trick is to pay attention to what sparks your interest. So Quincy Troop, who was the poet laureate of California for a while and my poetry teacher at UC San Diego, told us to never write anything for anybody but ourselves. That as soon as we started writing something for somebody else, the writing was already lost. So this is really about finding what sparks your interest, what's interesting to you. And journaling is an awareness practice that's a little bit of a circle, right? It's a little bit like the snake eating its tail, and this idea that we need to build our awareness of what we're interested in and like what's happening for us in order to journal. But journaling is also one of those ways that we build awareness. So it's the circle that feeds itself. And another writing teacher, John Granger, this time was my nonfiction writing teacher at UC San Diego. And John Granger, if you ever hear this, I just need you to know I appreciate you so much. This the very first day of class, of this nonfiction class that I was taking. He stumbles in. He's got dirt and twigs and leaves in his hair. His jacket and his hair are all askew. There's crap all over him. And he's gripping this leaf in his hand and he starts twirling it. And as he's twirling it, you can see the light and dark sides are flickering. And he goes, I just had to grab this. And I fell down a hill trying to get this for you guys. But I just really wanted you to all see that this is what the Greeks were talking about when they said Athena's eyes flashed like the leaves of an olive tree. And he's flashing the leaf for us. So John Granger, I love you. I appreciate you. So he had us do this writing assignment where we picked a place to sit down outside. And we only got to write about what we were actually observing. Luckily for me, I happened to sit down next to a candy bar that was swarming with ants, and I can't even tell you how ecstatic he was that he got to read about their undulating swarming over this decadent pile of discard. It was very dramatic. I'm sure that's shocking to you. I was very dramatic the way I used to write back in college. So you can write about the morning light that's coming through. You can write about the fact that you noticed your shoulders relaxed when you took that first sip of your morning brew. You can write about what's happening around you as one of your journal prompts. Writing is very much about witnessing and then being able to name that in a way that we can show it to somebody else. Other places you can go for prompts are people you admire. So I mentioned a psychologist. It's Dr. Nicole LaPera, who goes by the Instagram handle, the holistic psychologist, and she focuses on healing through greater consciousness. And she has a future self journal with prompts such as, quote, today I will focus on shifting my pattern of ... or 3 traits my future self will have are fill in the blank. I also personally like to go to podcast host. So Adrienne Marie Brown and Toshi Regan have been doing Octavia's Parables. And at the end of Octavia's Parables, they have a list of questions that they suggest you think about for how to deal with change, for how to create community, and how to develop resiliency. But it's all through this lens of Afrofuturism. So it's like world building, like what's the world that we want to create? This is the world that we live in, like what happens when dystopia hits, or like the dystopia we're living in or the dystopia we're afraid of. And then what's the future that we want to build? And then as part of my exploration on open relating, I read the book More Than Two by Franklin View, which also has questions at the end of its chapters. So there are prompts there. Anyways, the point of all of this is that all of those things I just mentioned, the polyamory, the Afrofuturism, the mental health, these are really niche interests of mine. These are things that I really care about. And so my suggestion to you would be to get really specific about what it is you're interested in. Because I think that's part of the problem with the prompts being too vague is they're not targeted to a specific interest. So why would they be interesting to you? Because they're just kind of vague. And it's this idea, right? The reason why we niche something is so that like we fly our freak flag and then everybody else knows like where to come over and find us. It's how we know like what we're interested in and what we're invested in. So be able to name that for yourself. Get really clear on what that is, because otherwise it's going to be boring because it's too vague. So think about why you're journaling. Are you trying to upgrade your cosmology? Are you trying to change your belief systems, the way you think in some way? If that's true, then it can be really helpful to just write down the stories you're telling yourself and when they serve you, how they serve you, and when you might actually need to change them. Be really clear about what you want to journal about. If you want to be more creative, then you might want to involve art in the process. Maybe you need to look at visual art the way that I did. Maybe you need to see a dance performance. Maybe you need to listen to your favorite piece of classical music and then write about how it made you feel or what it inspired in you or what visualizations came up. I just also realized I'm talking really fast because I love writing and I love talking about writing. I love talking. I love writing. And because of this listener question, I get to talk about writing. All right. Tangent. So where do you find inspiration? You can read books, you can listen to music, you can talk to people, go on adventures, write about it. And now let's talk about writer's block. Much of writer's block is accepting that it's part of the practice. You aren't always going to be inspired. The next thing you write isn't always going to be better than the next thing, because writing is an art and art isn't linear. It ebbs and flows. And we like that, I mean, it's definitely hard. Like when we go through this feast and famine, like during the feast, we're like, oh, I'm so good at this. And during the famines, you're like, why am I so crap at this? It can be a rough ride for the ego. But part of that is what gives it life, right? So peaks and valleys and plateaus are what create this like lively heartbeat, right? If it's just a flat line, if it's always the same, that's a dead heartbeat. So those highs, those lows, and those resting areas in between are what gives this creative practice life. It is a creative practice. It needs that healthy heartbeat. Okay, so what do you do when it hits? Because you don't want to just grump through it. Every writer has their hack. And so you're going to have to figure out what yours is. Some people do morning pages where they just dump all of their thoughts out onto a piece of paper, right? Like just anything that's crossing their mind, they're just dumping it out. I really enjoy Sarah Jane Case's practice where she has you write 10 good things. And this is a variation on gratitude journaling, because gratitude journaling, it can be a little bit like, I'm so grateful that I have a house. I'm so grateful that I'm loved. Like it can be these big, heavy, important things where we're like, I should feel grateful for all these things. And like, yeah, great. If you do, that's great. But then it can also get a little repetitive where you're like, well, the next day, like I'm still grateful that I got to eat food and sleep in a bed and receive a hug from a loved one. And then the next day it's the same. And so 10 good things invites a little bit of lightness and a little bit of variety into it. So for instance, if I'm looking like 10 good things right now, I'm like, oh, I really like that little owl decoration. That's a good thing. Love that crystal. And by the way, got a brand new bottle of maple syrup, which means I can make all the pumpkin bread I want. Really easy, right? Like super light. 10 good things. And then Shane, who's the founder of Mudwater, writes a line down the center of his paper and then crosses it like a T at the top. And on one side, it's his to-do list. And if I'm being completely honest, I can't remember what's on the other side. But the point is that Shane knows it's important to just put something down on paper. And again, like if you're doing this on the laptop, like just type your favorite color or a string of nonsense words. Like it's really important to just get something down. And here's the thing. Part of the way we tackle writer's block is by creating some kind of routine. So you sit down in the same place at the same time of day, maybe even for the same length of time, and you just commit that you're going to be there regardless of how much you write or the quality of what you write. And so this can be, you can set a word count, like I'm going to write 300 to 400 words, or I'm going to sit here for 30 to 45 minutes, but you commit to sitting there because your body's getting used to this thing that you're doing. And not every day is going to be an on day, but at least your body knows like this is what we do at this time as we write. Even sitting down to write the question, why do I want to journal? What will journaling offer me? And even if you write, I don't know, you've written something, you've started to build that muscle, you've started to embody that habit. I hope that helps. I'm curious, do you have a journaling habit? If you have a journaling habit, what helped? If you don't have a journaling habit, what are your obstacles? And I know, it's your kids. I know your kids are the reason why you can't journal, everyone. I hear you out there. And then where are your favorite inspirations for prompts? Like where do you get them? Go ahead and tell me, leave it in the comments, send an email. I'd love to hear from you. And here's a quote from Stephen King to help inspire you. It's one of my favorites. Don't wait for the muse. As I've said, he's a hard-hearted guy who's not susceptible to a lot of creative fluttering. This isn't the Ouija board or the spirit world we're talking about here, but just another job like laying pipe or driving long-haul trucks. Your job is to make sure the muse knows where you're going to be every day from 9 till noon or 7 till 3. If he does know, I assure you that sooner or later he'll start showing up. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else where you listen. Also, go to trendswithbenefits.com for all of our written content, as well as to sign up for our weekly newsletter. I love answering your listener questions. If you have a question for me, please send it to podcast@mudwtr.com so I can offer you some support. Also, give me feedback. If I answer your question, you're like, nah, y'all, that was not it. Or if you're like, yeah, I love that, I want more of that, let me know. Talk to me. We're building a community together, co-creating, co-conspiring together. And as part of that, I get to offer you a discount code. It's BOOST25 for 25% off your first order of Mushroom Boost, which is Mudwater's newest product. It's 8 different mushrooms that have vitality and focus and immunity building properties in it. You can add it to your smoothie, you can add it to your hot beverage, you can add it to your pumpkin bread, whatever you want. Good luck writing!